And if you look at it today, it's as smooth as a gyroscope. It's absolutely incredibly shot. You see a man doing it for real.
Before CGI and modern special effects, movies relied on real courage, clever tricks, and sometimes sheer madness. Silent films, westerns, and early adventure movies were full of breathtaking stunts. Actors leaping from rooftops, racing along speeding trains, or dangling from towering structures. These weren't digital illusions. They were real people, risking it all for a shot at cinematic magic. Today, we'll look back at some of Hollywood's most daring stunts and the brave men and women who made them unforgettable. Harold Lloyd's famous clock stunt. Harold Lloyd, one of the most celebrated stunt performers of the silent era, became known for playing characters who always seemed to stumble into danger, whether in Never Weaken, Grandma's Boy, or Why Worry. His 1923 classic, Safety Last, followed the same pattern, only this time, the stakes looked higher than ever. In the film's most unforgettable moment, Lloyd's character clings desperately to the hands of a giant clock hanging above the bustling city streets. What audiences didn't know was that the danger was more about perspective than reality. The towering skyscraper was actually a carefully built movie set, designed to trick the eye. Through clever camera angles, it appeared as though Lloyd was suspended hundreds of feet in the air, with Los Angeles skyline stretching behind him. In truth, he was perched just 2 stories above the ground, with a platform below to keep him safe. The illusion was so convincing that it remains one of cinema's most iconic stunts. Douglas Fairbanks' secret behind the sail slide. Douglas Fairbanks wasn't just a swashbuckling screen hero, he was also a close friend of Charlie Chaplin and one of the original founders of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. In the 1920s and 30s, he reigned as Hollywood's king of adventure, thrilling audiences in films like Robin Hood, The Mark of Zorro, and The Black Pirate. One of the most memorable moments in The Black Pirate shows Fairbanks plunging his knife into a ship's sail and sliding smoothly down its surface. To moviegoers, it looked daring, effortless, and impossibly dangerous. But behind the scenes, a clever bit of stagecraft made it all work. Fairbanks later explained to young actor Robert Parrish how the trick was done. Instead of clutching a knife, he actually gripped a baseball bat hidden in the fabric, while a pulley system behind the sail gently lowered him at a steady speed. The sail itself had been carefully pre-cut, and then loosely stitched back together, so it would rip apart cleanly as he descended. What looked like a reckless feat of gravity-defying bravery was, in fact, a carefully planned illusion, equal parts athleticism and Hollywood ingenuity. Chaplin's roller skating illusion. Charlie Chaplin, the undisputed master of silent comedy, had a gift for turning the simplest situations into unforgettable scenes. In modern times, one of his most famous gags shows him roller skating, blindfolded no less, right up to the edge of what seems to be an open balcony. As he glides backwards, it appears that he is only inches away from a deadly fall. But the danger was all smoke and mirrors. Instead of skating near a real drop, Chaplin relied on a clever early special effect. The production team used a large mirror to reflect an image of the set, making it appear as though there was a 2-story plunge beyond the railing. In reality, he was skating safely on solid ground. The trick was simple, but brilliantly executed, and it fooled audiences so completely that many held their breath, convinced they were watching Chaplin risk his life for a laugh. Margaret Hamilton's fiery exit. Margaret Hamilton had adored the Wizard of Oz since childhood, so stepping into the role of the Wicked Witch of the West was a dream come true. Still, the experience brought its share of unpleasant surprises, both for her and for the children who would later remember her terrifying screen presence. In one early scene set in Munchkinland, The witch makes a dramatic disappearance in a flash of fire and smoke, vanishing through a trap door beneath her feet. The stunt was meant to be quick and safe, but during one take the timing went wrong. The door released a moment too late, and Hamilton was caught in the pyrotechnics meant to simulate the flames. She suffered painful injuries, second-degree burns on her face and third-degree burns on her hands, which kept her away from filming for 6 long weeks. When she finally returned to the set, she made her position perfectly clear. With characteristic humor, she told the crew, "I'll come back under one condition: no more fireworks." Buster Keaton's deadly house stunt. By the 1920s, Buster Keaton had earned fame not just for his stone-faced comedy, but also for performing jaw-dropping stunts that few other actors would dare attempt. Perhaps the most astonishing of them all came in Steamboat Bill Jr. In one unforgettable scene, Keaton's character stands calmly in front of a house after a raging storm, unaware of the danger above him. Suddenly, the entire facade of the building comes crashing down, only for him to be saved by the narrow opening of a single window frame which passes neatly around his body. The stunt was real. The wooden facade weighed several tons, and there was no margin for error. To ensure Keaton hit his exact mark, the crew carefully measured the spot and even nailed his shoes to the ground, so he wouldn't be off by an inch. Keaton himself appeared calm, but the rest of the crew wasn't so confident. Some turned their backs, and a few even walked off the set, unwilling to watch what they feared might be the death of their leading man. Against all odds, the stunt worked flawlessly, and the moment went down as one of the most breathtaking in silent film history. Helen Gibson's daring train leap. Helen Gibson, often celebrated as the first true stuntwoman in Hollywood, was as fearless as they came. Raised around horses and seasoned in rodeo shows, she brought her grit and athleticism to the screen. Her most frequent work was doubling actress Helen Holmes in the thrilling serial The Hazards of Helen. In one episode, fittingly titled A Girl's Grit, Gibson faced a stunt that demanded both precision and nerve. She was to leap from the roof of a train station onto a moving train below. The distance was measured over and over, and she rehearsed the jump onto a stationary train until it felt second nature. When cameras rolled, she later recalled, "I was not nervous as it approached, and I leaped without hesitation." But reality had a surprise in store. While the speed and distance had been calculated, no one accounted for the rocking motion of the train itself. Gibson landed, but the car's sway knocked her off balance, sending her tumbling toward the edge. At the last moment, she managed to grab hold of an air vent, saving herself from disaster. That would have been enough to thrill any audience. But Gibson wasn't finished. To heighten the drama, she deliberately dangled her body out over the edge, pushing the danger even further. On screen, it looked effortless. In truth, it was another moment where bravery, quick thinking, and sheer daring kept one of Hollywood's earliest pioneers alive. Yakima Canutt's legendary stagecoach stunt. Long before Hollywood developed elaborate stunt departments, Yakima Canutt was setting the standard. A champion rodeo rider turned stuntman. He brought his daring skills to the screen in the 1920s and 30s, and many consider him the first true master of the craft. Modern stuntman Vic Armstrong once summed it up best. He was the first person to make a science of it. Yakima Canutt was the daddy of us all. The greatest there's ever been. One of Canutt's most celebrated feats appears in John Ford's classic Stagecoach. In the scene, he leaps from his galloping horse, sails over one of the lead horses, and lands on the wagon tongue to try to halt the coach. His character is then shot, sending him crashing to the ground as the 6-horse team and the heavy stagecoach thunder directly over him at nearly 45 miles per hour. Somehow, Canutt emerges unscathed, grabbing another horse to continue the chase. The secret to his survival lay in careful planning. Canutt had fitted metal bars between each pair of horses, keeping them 3 feet apart. This clever adjustment ensured that when he hit the ground, the animals passed cleanly over him instead of trampling him. The stunt was so dangerous that when the cameras finished rolling, the crew doubted they had captured it properly. Canutt, ever fearless, offered to do it again. The director quickly refused, saying firmly, "I'll never shoot that again." Dick Grace and the Science of Crashing Planes. In the early days of Hollywood aviation stunts, no one had a reputation quite like Dick Grace. Known as one of the greatest stunt pilots of his era, he routinely performed death-defying plane crashes on film, and yet, remarkably, escaped with only a handful of serious injuries, though he did once break his neck. Grace always insisted his survival was not luck, but the result of meticulous preparation. Writing in Modern Mechanics in 1930, he explained his method. "Whatever the nature of the location, I must accept it as part of the problem I must solve. Before the stunt, I must know every inch of that territory and the ground surrounding it for several hundred yards. The next thing I note is the prevailing wind, presupposing that in all likelihood conditions on the appointed day will be normal. Even the time of day mattered." Grace revealed a peculiar but very deliberate routine. One of the little details which plays a most important part in the successful completion of a thrill is the time of day at which it is done. "I have always tried to crash at 11:45 a.m. Such a statement sounds absurd, ridiculous. It would almost seem as if I were superstitious, but when consideration is given to this angle, it becomes quite the sensible thing to do. At that time of day, the sun is highest in the skies, and so there is less likelihood of being blinded as I dip a wing or tear off a landing gear. Equally important as the sun are the general wind conditions. I have found that the best prevailing weather for my purpose occurs at high noon." For Grace, every crash was a carefully calculated maneuver, not a reckless gamble. What audiences saw as sudden disaster on the screen was, in reality, the product of precise planning, patience, and an unshakable understanding of both planes and nature. That's a wrap on Hollywood's most daring stunts, from Lloyd's clock to Grace's plane crashes. If you loved these stories, like, subscribe, and tell us your favorite stunt in the comments. Thanks for watching.